There are few feelings as electric as a new Star Wars premiere. I mean, after so many movies and shows, you'd think we'd be used to it by now, but the moment that Lucasfilm logo hits the screen, you can't help but get goosebumps and know you're in for something special. And next week, that logo is taking most fans to an entirely new period they've never seen before. Which begs one very important question. Is it gonna work? I'm Eric, welcome to Utini, and today we're gonna see how the Acolyte will be able to launch a brand new era of Star Wars. It's no secret that the idea of eras has been on a lot of people's minds this year for some reason or other. But when it comes to Star Wars, eras have been an important part of the saga for decades. Back in the beginning, we had the era of the Galactic Civil War, or the Age of Rebellion if we're going by the timeline, where we met the OG gang of Luke, Leia, Han, and Chewie. Then we jump back to the prequel era to visit Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Padme during the Clone Wars and the eventual fall of the Jedi, all before leaping ahead to the rise of the First Order with Rey, Finn, Poe, and the old gang all over again. And that's really just the tip of the iceberg if we're being honest. But why are eras so important to us as Star Wars fans? Why do we have such a need and appreciation for all these different times in the history of our favorite universe? Well, there's a few reasons, to be honest. For one, it allows different types of stories to be told within the same mythology, so we can stay excited without having to relearn the basics every single time. We get to actively use our knowledge of Star Wars, which almost acts as real-world history, and that offers a continuous sense of immersion that can't really be found anywhere else. This multi-era structure also feels more representative of a true-life universe. I mean, think about it. The history of humanity has been told over years upon years of experiences, and yet they all affect each other in some way. And the same is true in fiction. There's an excitement in exploring a new era and an understood world, because not only do you get to experience a brand new story, but you also get to see how it was shaped by the events of the past and went on to set up the future. And here's how we get to The Acolyte. The Acolyte will be the first live-action Star Wars TV show set in the High Republic era. And even though I'm saying that out loud for the 100th time, it still feels completely surreal. Because while this may not initially seem like a big deal on the outside, the premiere of this show has the potential to be a landmark event in Star Wars as we see an entirely new visual era unfold for the first time in years. Now, like any other project, it will rise and fall based on the merits of the storytelling itself. But until we witness that in full, we're going to focus on 3 reasons that this infusion of the High Republic in live action could change the franchise forever. With its rich history, the potential for surprise, and its ability to set a series of new precedents. Now, for most viewers of The Acolyte, the High Republic will be a brand new idea. This era of heroic Jedi and gold tabards will be unlike anything they've ever seen before, and that is incredibly exciting. For those that are creating the show, and for those of us that are a bit more obsessed with other kinds of Star Wars media, the High Republic has been living with us for years. Way back in 2020, the High Republic was announced as a Star Wars initiative surrounding only books and comics. Since then, a ton of stories have been told in the time preceding Episode 1, and the reception has been wonderful. There are characters in this period that have more content written about them than Yoda. There have been battles filled with Jedi that rival the Battle of Geonosis, and more than anything, a solid foundation has proven that amazing storytelling can happen within this era. Now, we're not sure how much of the previous history will be addressed in the Acolyte show, but there are a few things we do know that make the accessibility of this new project a little bit easier. Sure, we know that the show takes place over 100 years before The Phantom Menace, but thanks to the previous history of the initiative, we also know some foundational elements that are sure to appear, like costume styles, ship technology, and even the state of Jedi philosophy. By having these years of books and comics establish a baseline for what the High Republic means, the Acolyte doesn't have to start from scratch with all these elements. We know there are multiple colors of lightsabers, we know the Jedi are at the height of their power, and we even know who makes up the Jedi Council, including a few members who, evidently, make it all the way through to the prequels. Because the history of the High Republic isn't ancient history that has already evaporated into legend. It's the literal era that we'll be exploring within the show. And while Leslie Headland and the writer's room don't have to pull directly from the established texts, they do have the option to do so. An option which they clearly exercised while in adding Vernestra Rwoh to the series, one of the fan-favorite characters in the novels over the last couple of years. Now, speaking of Leslie Headland, the showrunner has previously confirmed that Vernestra will be the only pre-existing High Republic character who will appear in this season of The Acolyte, and that's just fine. There's nothing wrong with letting the characters stand on their own 2 feet. And that also opens the door for plenty of things that Star Wars fans love the most: surprises. Star Wars fans are pretty smart. It's true. After so many years of being invested in a single universe, we actually have a lot of information pinging around in our heads at any given moment. I mean, just think about the basics. We know the Empire is bad, and it was formed from the ashes of the Galactic Republic, which was also tied up with the Jedi. And we know that the Rebellion is good, and it was formed initially by the political efforts of Bail Organa and Padme Amidala, the stepfather and birth mother of Leia Organa, who is the twin sister of Luke Skywalker, both of whom are the children of Anakin Skywalker, who is now Darth Vader, the enforcer of Emperor Palpatine, who was once Senator, then Chancellor Palpatine. Oh, but he's also a Sith Lord, who is the eternal enemy of the Jedi we mentioned earlier. And that is barely a percentage of what we hold in our heads at any given time. And thus far, every Star Wars live-action TV show has carried this amount of assumed information into its creation. You know, there have been layers of familiarity intertwined within the stories of The Mandalorian, Andor, and Ahsoka, because we inherently know the bigger picture outcomes of the decades that surround those stories. I mean, they're excellent series, don't get me wrong. But The Acolyte has a chance to do something different, because it isn't shackled by that same kind of history. And I know this may seem contradictory, given that I just praised how much foundation has been laid for the High Republic. But despite all that history, there is still plenty of room for surprises to occur that live outside the world of waiting for cameos or crossovers. You know, we're not gonna see the Skywalker line. We're not gonna see Palpatine. We're just experiencing a story, period. And even though we will eventually get to the prequel era, the main pieces of that saga haven't really been placed on the board just yet, so really, anything can happen. And this is the kind of freedom that fans have been asking for quite some time. Now, we want to see Star Wars take a big swing. We want creators to really explore how far the universe can go. And let me tell you, if you weren't around for the release of Light of the Jedi back in 2021, this is exactly how it felt. Every page was a new character, a new ship, a new location, and it made for one of the most electrifying Star Wars releases in recent memory, especially at a time when we really needed that more than ever. And The Acolyte has a chance to capture that again for a much bigger audience. The wonder of discovery on the page is amazing, but there's something so quintessentially Star Wars about seeing new mythology play out in front of you on screen. And if we're already getting yellow lightsabers in trailers and Jedi vectors on posters, there is no limit to the surprises they must have in store for this season as a whole. Now, can a show exist purely on the strength of surprise and intrigue? Of course not. But it's silly not to acknowledge how cool those moments are. It's Luke flying in at the end of Mando. It's the statue of the father fading away at the end of Ahsoka. There are so many moments in Star Wars television that are able to balance the surprise of something new with the organic mythology that has been set up beforehand. And if The Acolyte can find that perfect balance, they have the opportunity to set a precedent for the entire future of the franchise. And here's where we have to be gross for just a quick second and acknowledge a little bit about the business of entertainment. Just for a second, I promise. Because we love stories. We love storytelling. We love universes that intersect, expand, and create mythologies that span thousands of years. But in an age of franchise entertainment and the ever-growing number of streamers and projects begging for our attention, studios are asking for one thing and one thing only: guarantees. There's only one problem. Those don't actually exist. For years, large entertainment companies have done their best to identify trends and capitalize on them for their audiences. Sometimes this can be fantastic and give us as fans tons of projects that we love, and sometimes it can feel like studios keep churning out the same types of projects because they're afraid of taking risks or losing money on things they don't know about, and eventually that leads to stagnance. But here's where The Acolyte can make a huge difference and potentially set up Star Wars for years of exciting success. See? I told you it'd just be a quick second. Because The Acolyte is expanding into a brand new visual era, it does inherently pose some creative risk to the higher-ups. These are characters we don't know in a time period filled with question marks, and the success of the show will rely solely on the craft of the creators and the excitement of the stories themselves. And if they succeed in creating something awesome and fans respond in kind, this sends a message of support for new, boundary-breaking projects, the likes of which we've never seen. Because sure, the obvious result of Acolyte's success would be a second season of the show. That's how show renewals have worked since the dawn of time. But the success of a multi-million-dollar Star Wars project that doesn't somehow tie back to the original saga opens the door for Disney Lucasfilm to keep doing this for years to come. I mean, we're already seeing this potential with James Mangold's Dawn of the Jedi movie in the works. And if the Acolyte proves to shareholders that the Star Wars community is hungry for brand new stories, maybe that movie gets a nudge in the right direction regarding budget or promo. Or honestly, at this point, just not getting canceled. The same ideal goes for Daisy Ridley's return as Rey in the New Jedi Order. Granted, this is much more related to the saga films than these other two projects, but there is still some inherent risk in going further in the timeline than ever before. And in an age where we keep hearing about projects getting cut because of algorithms or their inability to market things that aren't straight up sequels, this potential future is so beyond exciting. And in a way, it's a repetition of the history of Star Wars that we've been exposed to since the beginning. We've experienced these types of tentpole moments plenty of times before, after all. You know, when Heir to the Empire dared to go beyond Return of the Jedi and continue the Skywalker story. When the Clone Wars executed the future of George's vision in sequential animation, an unheard of decision until that point. When The Force Awakens carved its own path into the history of Star Wars on the backs of Rey, Finn, Poe, and Kylo, and trusted the fandom to fall in love with them. And when The Mandalorian made the bold choice that live-action Star Wars wasn't just for a movie theater. All of these projects took massive risks in order to bring great stories to Star Wars fans, and they paid off in ways that paved the way for countless projects after them. The Acolyte is another one of these tentpole moments. And if we can prove that it's actually good business to give us new stories and new eras, we could be set up for decades of prosperity. I'll be the first to admit, Star Wars fans have not always been the most accepting of change in the moment. Change is scary. And after all, we all became fans because we, by definition, really like what came before. But the best part of evolving in the community of Star Wars is realizing that change doesn't equal replacement, merely enhancement. I mean, just go talk to any High Republic fan. They're some of the nicest, most passionate people you could ever imagine. And I don't think that's an accident. Something about the High Republic era encourages this kind of radical acceptance and excitement for Star Wars and your fellow fans. And if that energy can be transferred to the larger community through the lens of the Acolyte, well, that's a future I can't wait to see. But until we get there, and until next time, may the Force be with you.